Welcome back to DissedMedia, a startup story. My name is Ben Olmos, founder and CEO of DissedMedia. This is a podcast where I take you along my journey of starting DissedMedia from the ground up. If this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. I'm happy you found us, and hopefully you'll like what you hear. For those of you coming back, I'm glad that we piqued your interest enough for you to return, and I hope that you enjoy this next step in our journey. This show is all about documenting DissedMedia's startup journey and keeping you in the loop every step of the way. I'll be keeping you up to date on meetings, phone calls, emails, and all the things that I need to do to get this business up and running. So with that, let's pick up where we left off last time. Welcome back, everybody, to DissedMedia, a startup story. This week, we have a whole panel of folks joining us. Alan, as usual. Alan, how's it going?
Going fantastic. I'm really jazzed about this session and multi-generations, man. I think we got them all covered.
Yeah, I think so too. So back again with us is Stefan. Stefan, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here. I didn't know if I was going to make it, so I'm very glad that I'm able to be a part of this.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here as well. And then also returning, our board member, Keith Watts. Keith, how are you?
I'm doing great. A little bit anxious. This group looks tough, so I'm going to approach with caution, but otherwise fine.
Awesome. And then special guest, one of the contributors for the Daily Pitch, Colin Chase. Colin, how are you?
Doing great, Ben. How about you?
I'm doing good.
This is the first time I've seen Colin. I've always seen the name.
That's true. He's joined our board calls before, and he usually is just a fly on the wall, doesn't say much. But I invited him on today because episode before last, we had Stefan on. We got into some really good conversation around the job market. Stefan had graduated from college, has his master's in communication. I know there's a more formal title to it than that, but that's what I'm going to call it for now. And happy to say, and we talked about this in the last episode, Stefan, you were able to land something here in Atlanta in the area of sports in your wheelhouse. So very happy and excited for you for that. But it got me to thinking about this topic of looking for work. Because I remember years ago when I was clawing my way around, still sometimes feel like I am, but trying to balance what I always call credibility and credentials, where you're building up both, you're trying to catch the attention of people to put your stake in the ground and move yourself a little further along. And it ties into the fact of something I always talk about, which is the fact that nobody's ever happy where they are. You're always looking for a little bit more. But I think when you're starting out in your career, that is even more so. It's more challenging, I think, sometimes. And for guys like myself and Alan and Keith, who we've been doing what we've been doing for a number of decades, I don't want to say it's easier, but I think for guys like us, we're a little out of touch with what it's like in the modern era. And so I thought it would be fun to have Colin and Stefan on to talk about trials, tribulations, challenges, frustrations, all of that wonderful stuff when it comes to looking for work or trying to move ahead where you're at. So that's the opener. So I will say this, just throwing it out there. Stefan, let's start with you for a second, because you had been looking for several months. You recently gained an opportunity. Tell us a little bit more about that and feelings of what it was like going from where you were to what you're doing.
Yeah, I graduated in May. And from there, I think I don't want to say expected, because expected is the wrong word to use, but I felt like I had set myself up to the point where I figured that maybe there would be some opportunities that would come my way in the coming months. And 2 months goes by, 3 months goes by, 4 months goes by, and it's denial everywhere. And there was probably a point where it would be like 20 emails coming in my inbox every day telling me that I didn't get this job that I applied for. And I got to the point where I was like, I don't even remember applying to this job, to be honest. But it just I don't want to say I was getting down on myself a little bit about it, but it started to feel like crunch time. And I think I'm super thankful for this opportunity that came about. And the way that it came about was, it felt very just out of the blue. I had actually applied for this job for the full-time, well, not the full, like the associate position of it, or what is it? Coordinator position, sorry, the coordinator position of it. And I was told on kind of the Zoom meeting that I didn't get the job. And then I was going out of town. It was about 2 weeks ago now. And the night before I left, I got a call back from the guy who interviewed me. And he was like, hey, we have a seasonal assistant open, and you're one of like our final two if you want to be a part of the application process for it. And I just said, sure. And sure enough, I ended up doing the Zoom meeting, all that type of stuff, and ended up getting the job. And it was just really crazy how it worked out, because he had mentioned that, he was complimentary of just how I conducted myself, I guess, in the Zoom thing. And it kind of stuck, I guess. So I'm thankful for it in that regard. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's just feelings of I just like, how did I get to this point right now? Because it feels like a lot of things changed within the last like 72 hours or so. But yeah.
It's kind of nice, I think, when you get into a new thing, because you're at that starting point, and then there's a lot of pathways that you can go. Colin, I'll turn my attention to you for a second, because you're a little bit different in that you've been working in a field that is not necessarily the field that you have a degree in. However, it's something that you have a knack for and you're good at. And for you, it's kind of like, how do you get from where you're at to that next higher level of responsibility, and, kind of grabbing the attention of people who are probably older than you, have more years of experience than you. Share a little bit about some of the things that you go through with where you're at and what you're trying to get into.
Yeah. So my field is, I'm essentially an industrial engineer. I work for a third-party logistics provider that works the assembly warehouse for a major auto manufacturer here in the South. So what that entails is a lot of specialized work that typically comes with a degree. And funnily enough, like as you said, I don't actually have an engineering degree. I have a terrible liberal arts degree. I have a poli-sci degree. It was a unique set of circumstances that kind of led me down this road. Part of it being my dad is a logistics expert, and somehow I picked up the knack as well. And part of it being just a happenstance out of college. I started working for UPS, and that got me into the field. So I'm running into this very strange, unique circumstance where I have this set of skills, experience after a few years. And we've been hearing the narrative a lot that the college degree is fading out, that you don't really need it as long as you have the skill sets. But a lot of the times, and from previous searches, it doesn't always equal that. So I don't know if it's because of the field, because it's so highly technical, but I've certainly had situations where I've applied to jobs and I've met all the experience qualifications. I just didn't meet the degree qualification. And unfortunately, with most jobs, you don't get really feedback as to why you were denied, but I'm probably thinking that that was at least one factor.
That's interesting. I know it's popular among the generations, probably I would say younger millennial to Gen Z, this narrative about college not being necessary, not being important, not being helpful. All it does is put you in debt. And, myself and Keith or Alan, feel free to weigh in as well. I have a foot probably in both camps. I think that there are jobs you most definitely need to have a higher level of education for. But there's a number of things out there that I think we're overqualifying people for work that doesn't really need that advanced degree to do. But at the same time, it's like, how do I convey that I've got the skill aside from job history? Colin, as you said, there are people, they're still looking for a degree in a lot of cases. Keith, you're in pharmaceuticals. What is the temperament for requiring a degree? I mean, again, I say pharmaceuticals because the perception there is that the more education you have, the better it probably is in that industry.
It's interesting. I don't know how many people that I've interviewed over the years, but I've populated a region and run a business unit. I've done many, many things. And recently I've been involved in helping a client hire people and involved in those interviews. And Colin, it's interesting what you said, because in the pharmaceutical industry, you have to have a degree. That's it. You got a degree? Great. I'm going to hire you because you're great. You've got the experience. You're somebody I want. And I've had this situation a number of times where I like the person. We didn't have Zoom back then. We would use these Betamax films, and a bunch of people would be interviewed and you'd see them and then you'd say, okay, they go through to the next round. But we would come up to the end of the interview and I'm like, well, I'll get back to you. And a couple of cases after I found out how people will trick the interviewer, I started asking, you did graduate, right? Because there were a couple of people who didn't graduate. I didn't find out till later, and we couldn't hire them. And to me, I'm sort of like Ben. I'm kind of in both camps. I understand the importance of a degree, but guess what? You could have that poli-sci degree and move up and end up running a Fortune 100 company in the pharmaceutical industry. It's been done. You just have to be very, very good and accept the training and move through the environment. And I think from my perspective, college helps you do that, right? So you've got to socialize, you've got to acclimate, you've got to manage a schedule and a budget and all kinds of things, unless you're a no good for nothing jock and they do all that for you. But I'm telling on myself a little bit, but you do have to have a degree. And it put us in a situation where we were at a disadvantage, I think, in terms of getting the best person for the job. I will say, final word, I interviewed somebody, I'll never forget him. I called him up the other day. This has been many years ago. And he had a degree and he did graduate. It was not from an accredited university. And one of the HR people brought me in. Now I'm running a business unit and I've got all kinds of stuff going on. And she's telling me, you're going to have to let him go, the HR person. And I said, why? He's got a degree. It's not an accredited degree. Well, how do I know that? How does he know that? Oh, I'm pretty sure he knows, but you don't know. Anyway, long story short, I really made her mad. But I said, no, he's the best person we have. And so therein lies the dilemma, right? You've got excellent talent. I did take him aside and explain to him, you were this close to losing your job. I would go back and ensure that you finish the hours you need from an accredited university, just so if anything happens to me, you don't have to worry about it. So anyway, that's the pharmaceutical industry.
It can get to a point sometimes, and I've actually experienced this with a company I used to work with, where low-level, entry-level job, fierce job market, very competitive, and to weed out candidates, they just put the stipulation that you needed a degree for a job that you really didn't need a degree for. It was customer service, telephone customer service work, but they were filtering out people by saying you needed a degree in order to do the work.
It's just a ticket to play. That's what I've always called it.
Yeah. And it's, for me, because I have degrees in business and I've stuck to my field, I've not really bumped up against this issue of not having a degree. However, though, in academia, I have bumped up against the issue of you don't have a PhD, we can't bring you into this school, or you can't teach this class. Or my favorite is, I've done project management for 15 plus years and managed projects for everybody from Walmart to Disney and, big companies. And I've been told, well, you don't have 12 credit hours in project management, so you can't teach this class. And so I'm like, well, okay, if those are your rules, I mean, they're dumb, but okay.
So Ben, at aerospace defense, the industry I was in for 10 years, seems a fairly close aligned to what Colin is at UPS with logistics and so forth. And 15 years ago, I was a hiring manager, and for every position that we had open, HR explained to us that there were over 1,000 applications for one position, entry-level position. That drove an incredible competitiveness. And to your point, Keith, you're exactly right. And when you said it's a ticket to play, HR would write the rec in such a way that the way to weed through 1,000 resumes that were coming into Raytheon's HR department was to put the requirement to have not just a college degree. In some of the positions, they ended up putting master's degree. I watched this over the 10 years I was there as the qualifications got higher and higher, just to get your resume in front of the hiring manager. Because out of that 1,000, they would weed it down to maybe 100. And then I would have to look at 10 to 20 of them and pick the ones that were going on to interviews. It was a ticket to play.
Yeah.
And you're right. You don't always get the best candidates because of it, but it is very much dependent on the field that you're in, the technical qualification. I mean, Raytheon is an aerospace defense company, and over half of the employees are engineers and scientists. So if you're going to enter that arena, you're going to have to be competitive. And even so, then they would get hired. They'd come in and they'd say, when am I going to get promoted? That's the next step. And I'd tell some of them, I'd say, we have employees here that I know that I mentor, that we've had for 10 years or more in an entry-level position, and they're not going to get promoted. They don't have an MBA. You got to go to the next level. And it is, your question earlier, are we overqualifying people for work? Absolutely, Ben. We are requiring levels in competitive industries that don't necessarily equate to the best qualified person.
And now, if anybody's paying attention to the news, just in the last week or two, we've had several companies laying off a few thousand people. And that's only going to create more competition in the workforce.
Yes.
But before I ask this next question, I want to turn it back to either Colin or Stefan. So what do you guys do to, let me ask the question this way. If you were advising one of your peers on strategies to get yourself noticed, what are some of the things that either of you guys are doing today to grab the attention of people? Or what do you feel like you need to do? Might be a better way of asking that question, because as they say, there's this stupid saying that I can't stand, perception is reality. And I think that we create some really crazy perceptions with younger people sometimes in looking at the workforce. So what are the perceptions out there today around that process of trying to get ahead or trying to get in?
Stefan, I hope you don't mind if I take this one. I take a kind of an interesting perspective on this because I've just been put into a position where I'm actually starting to hire my own people. And so I'm going through that process of, I've seen it from both ways, where you're trying to get in somewhere and also where people are trying to get in with you. And I want to qualify my answer a little bit because I think it's highly dependent on what your role you want to play. So we were talking about college degrees, and if you're getting into a technical field, any of the hard sciences, engineering, things like that, a lot of it's certifications and a lot of it's degrees. Now, experience, of course, matters anywhere in any field. So to me, as a manager, since I'm a little biased, I will always take experience over any of those things. But I've definitely seen the trend, at least in the engineering field, where people are just throwing qualifications at you. They want qualification in this, qualification in that, and they just say something that you know something about something that matters in industrial engineering. This guy knows Six Sigma Green Belt. This guy knows material planning in automotive sequence operations, et cetera, et cetera. But that's one of the things that happens. Other fields, so say you're in the operations area, maybe you're applying for a supervisor or a managerial position. I think what you find there is your resume almost entirely depends on experience. Your degrees don't really matter as much unless you're just getting into the business. or it's based off of who you know. Now, the thing that I think really makes the difference there is your interviews, because when you're hiring for operations, it is 100% entirely dependent on who you are as a person and how you interact with people. And so engineers, as long as you ask the basic questions like, do you know what you're talking about? Or are you just spouting, buzzwords? Those you're pretty much okay to get somebody who can maybe do the job as long as they have those qualifications. With maybe an operations aspect, though, you definitely want to be testing them in the interview. And I think that's where, if you're looking for those two fields, that's how you can get ahead. Now, of course, we were talking about this narrative where you don't need a college degree anymore. And I think that definitely applies to a bunch of fields, especially in more of the liberal arts aspect. So if your programming is not liberal arts, but that's a good example of your body of work just tells everything. Your body of work tells you everything in that. If you're an artist, if you're a graphic designer, body of work. But that's just my 3 cents on 3 different aspects of where you have to approach how to stand out.
Stefan, how about you?
Yeah, I don't know if there's much more to say beyond that. That was fantastic. I guess to pick up on that, because obviously I'm in that situation where I would like to think I have the degrees, I just don't have the experience. For me personally, I think the thing that's, especially in this situation for me right now, this guy remembered me from almost a year ago now, and it was because I had met him in person and I was just curious. I asked a lot of questions. I emphasized that I have this willingness to learn, and I think the one thing that would always stand out, at least for an entry level type of position, was you tell them you have the opportunity to mold me into the person that you like, the worker that you want me to be, that quintessential employee to you. And I think in terms of that, I think it's just being open to taking that mold and then being able to craft it on your own. I don't know if I answered that correctly.
There's no wrong answers. It's really just your perspective. And the reason I wanted to get each of yours perspective is because I wanted to also ask Alan and Keith what your thoughts are on hiring and that right person. And I'll kick it off by saying that when I was hiring people, when I was in charge of that process, first of all, I think every time you hire for a role, you're looking for something a little bit different. And what's can be challenging, I think, as an applicant is that the job description will get posted as it does every single time. What you won't know is what that manager is looking for this time they're hiring for that role. And it means that there's some unknowns that you're up against. And if you get through that process of somebody recognizing that you're a qualified candidate, that you are somebody that they're interested in talking to, I think one of the biggest challenges is knowing what that manager is looking for this time that they're hiring for that role. And I think each of us who have hired people have probably experienced that. The other thing that I will say is that as a hiring manager, it was interesting to me moving from being a candidate to being somebody reviewing candidates, because I realize that while there are some, there is some science to it, it's a lot of art. It's a lot of not quite knowing. Let me back up. There's a couple instances where things get interesting. For lower level jobs, you're going to probably can get a bunch of resumes, people you don't know. And every once in a while, you'll get somebody who says, hey, can you take a look at my nephew, son-in-law, neighbor's kid, whoever, right? And you'll do that. The higher up in the organization that you're hiring for, then you really start to get those people coming to you and saying, hey, check out this person. You get a lot more people advocating for people that they know. And every once in a while, we'd get like a president of a division, who's like, hey, they personally are recommending somebody for a job that you have open. And sometimes you got to call that person back and say, sorry, they're not quite what we're looking for this role, which is always a little, if you're a lower level manager, that's always a little bit challenging. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that the pathway to getting in front of somebody, if you go just by looking at the job boards, Indeed, whatever, and putting something out there, I would say the percentage of success is low. When you have an advocate for you on the inside who can reach out to the hiring manager, your chances get a little bit higher. When you know somebody on the inside, it ratchets up even more. When you're looking, you got to get creative, I think, to get on somebody's radar. And some of the things that I've done in the past is get on LinkedIn, find out if you know somebody in your network who happens to know anybody working at that company. Ask them, what's the process? What's it like? How do you get on somebody's radar? I know that there's people who say, tailor each resume for the job you're applying for. Jesus Christ, who's got time to do that? Like, if I had to re-tailor my resume for every job posting in a half-failed attempt at trying to find the right keywords, it's like, we talk on this podcast about SEO optimization and trying to appease the internet gods with the content that we put out there. It's the equivalent of doing that. I will tell you, sometimes we really got to work an article to make sure we're hitting all the right things. I can't imagine trying to apply for 20 jobs a day and going through that process each and every time. You'd spend so much time putting in applications, you'd have no time to do anything else. But Keith or Alan, what's some of the inside baseball that you could share about getting on somebody's radar, getting noticed, raising awareness to people who are out there looking for stuff?
I'm going to go real quick, Alan, because I've got to run to the airport. But one of the things to focus on, it's interesting as I've watched lately a startup hiring people, and the people that you have to get on the radar are the recruiters. These people go exclusively through recruiters, and they hire a recruiter and pay them a certain amount of money to find candidates. And then when they find the candidates, they promote them. And what I've noticed is I will receive a resume, but then some background and a lot of information about the candidate according to the pre-interview done by the recruiter. And so hitting a home run with the recruiter will take up some of the slack if it's a very good candidate and help modify the resume so it addresses those things, Ben, that you were talking about, right? Now, we recently hired a couple people. I didn't hire anybody. I contributed to the interview process and gave my feedback, and good or bad, they took the feedback and they hired both candidates. One I'm finding was a tremendously competent interviewee. And the other one, also very good in an interview, but is turning out to be an extraordinary employee, where the other one is hesitant. They're going into intensive care units, and it's high pressure, and medicine in certain environments can be very high pressure, and you've got to be, this is where Colin's degree comes in a little bit. I mean, because we could teach you, which is what I was responsible for, some of the clinical stuff, to get them prepared to go in and understand and respond at a certain level to clinical questions. We can do those things in terms of the training, but you can't, like you were talking about earlier, Ben. I don't know how to pierce the veil of, this guy has got heart and he's got the ability to do what he says he has done and can do for us. Now, I will tell you, my final word on this is, I was worried to death about how strongly I advocated for the candidate that's turning out to be so good. He played football for Mississippi State. We hit it off immediately, of course. And I'm sitting there I'm watching him, and I watch everybody. just verbal and nonverbal cues. And I'm thinking, he's good. He's good. I know what he's been through. And so it is something of a concern that I would lean towards a confirmatory bias in hiring. And you can't, I think the really skilled artist, Ben, that you referred to, somehow pierce that veil and eliminate confirmatory bias. Whereas others will tell you, no. You go with your gut. Well, your gut's confirmatory bias, in my opinion. And I think the data bear that out. Anyway, with that, I'm going to leave you all. Please invite me again.
Yeah, Keith.
Stefan's on because he's so annoying. I love you, Stefan. You know I love you. Colin, it's so great to see you. You need to pop up on Friday, and we need to see you, buddy. And you need to contribute more. He's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I got to run. I got to get my boy.
All right, Keith, have a good one.
See you, Keith. So, Ben, a lot of what you and Keith have already said, I think, is really true. It's science and art. And depending on the level of the position, I think that scale changes. I think the higher up you go, like director to VP and up, it becomes far more art than the specific science. And the interview process becomes, it's still important in both of them. The way Raytheon worked, and I appreciated this, is all of our interviews were panel interviews. And so people that were interviewing the candidate were from diverse backgrounds at diverse levels. And we all had the baseline, which was, to your point earlier, is the rec. What does the rec say? And if you didn't meet the minimum requirement, you never made the interview, much less got beyond that. It's gates at every level that were important. And as Colin was saying earlier, too, different kinds of organizations require different levels between the credentialing and the experience. And the irony to all of this is some of my best consultants were people that didn't have a degree advising a multi-billion-dollar a year business.
I think what's interesting about all this is that when you're starting out, you've got to prove that you can do something and do it wisely. And it's not just about getting something done. It's not just task assignment, task completion. That's a very important part of it, but it's doing that task with efficiency. It's doing that task with as little complaining as possible. And it's about completing what you're assigned, not just getting it done, but doing it that and then some. That usually will get you noticed. And then at some point, what's going to happen is you transition from being tactical to being strategic. And when that happens, you almost have to start letting go of all those things that made you good at what you do, all of those tactical things.
Yes.
And learn how to delegate and learn how to be a thought leader around those things so that you empower and encourage and motivate other people to do them. And your job is no longer to actually do that stuff, but rather to think beyond doing that stuff more strategically. And what happens along this journey is some people never move to the strategic stuff. They only stay in the tactical. They only are reactionary, and they don't develop the finesse or they don't learn how to shake hands and kiss babies and be political. And so they're only ever good at doing the tactical stuff. And what can happen sometimes on the tactical side is that you see the thought leaders and you see the strategic thinkers and you want to get there, but you never do the stuff tactically that's going to put you on the radar of those people. Because if you fail at the tactics, the strategic people are going to be like, I know you think you're strategic, but you're not. And then they never give you the chance. It's hard, I think, going from tactical to strategic, and then learning how to stop being the person who does everything. I always used to love it when I worked in lower level jobs and people would get pissed off at the people in charge and they'd be like, they don't even know what we do here. They're not supposed to know what you do. They're not supposed to know that. It's not their job to know that stuff anymore. A friend of mine had an analogy. It was a great analogy. He said, when you're on a plane, do you want the pilot back there mingling with you, or do you want him flying the plane? Right? You want the pilot flying the plane. Part of this is understanding your role and where you sit in the organization and playing it to the right degree to work those opportunities. But it's challenging. It's hard. I don't know, you guys. Stefan, Colin, what do you guys think of that? I mean, is that an unfair analogy? Is it a crazy analogy? Is it a frustrating analogy?
So you're asking if, maybe just to clarify a little bit, Ben. So you're saying that like there should be a difference between the tactical and strategic role. So what your ground level view is versus what your high level view is. And that really influences how you should approach either getting hired or hiring.
I think it does influence those things. And I think there's a middle ground there called middle management, where you have to be effective at both things. And
no, definitely. So,
and I think that's where it gets hard as you're trying to carve your way into those higher level roles.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think we probably all, even in any organization we worked in, we've seen those people who are somebody on the ground who thinks very strategically and doesn't really get much done on the ground. And then you've also seen people who were very good tactically. They were the shop floor manager. They were the good team member who was always there to support everything. They pushed things through when they needed to. But then you see them get into those middle level roles and even high level roles. And when it comes to a strategy and a goal, they got nothing. They just want to be attack dogs and go after it.
Or just the administrative side of things. Because the other part of management, working your way up, is learning how to do administration. And that means all the paperwork and boring stuff that nobody likes to do, but you have to do as a manager as part of your job. The not fun, boring stuff. And a lot of times that's too where people can face challenges, is learning to get through those things and learn how to finesse through that stuff.
No, yeah, I think you're definitely right, Ben. You're onto something there. So it's something to keep in mind, right? When you're moving up in your career, that you're not always going to be, even if you're this highly technical expert, say you're a computer science engineer, something crazy. Once you start getting up in the ladder, a lot of people don't realize you're not going to be working the thing that you thought you were going to be working anymore. You're not going to be ground level designing the wires and the circuitry of the circuit board anymore. You're going to be managing people. You're going to be managing strategy. And you often see a lot of people fail there. People don't prepare for it. They think that it's an easy transition to go from being the guy who can control their whole world to being the guy who has to control everybody's world. And I've seen plenty of examples. Unfortunately, I'm not even that far in my career.
It kind of goes back to an old saying of what got you here won't get you there. And the things that you do to get to where you're at, and I think this is just true for everyone, is, you will break through and you'll get to that thing, right? That you want to do. Like Stefan recently got to that thing, right? And now you got to realize that, okay, now that I'm here, now I got to start to reinvent things, because what got me here isn't going to get me to the next thing that I want to do. And if I want to prep myself for the next thing, I got to start learning new tricks and learning new things and how to do that. I think that there's a little bit of frustration there for people who are younger, who feel that. I don't know. I'm making a lot of assumptions here when I think that people, but my assumptions are really fed by things that I pick up in social media. It's probably not a great place to pick up social cues, what's going on in social media. But the perception that I get is the burnout happens faster, and people are frustrated by the fact that they work, aren't getting ahead, and the things that they're doing don't feel like they're good enough. And gee, Alan, have you ever felt that way in your career?
I got to tell you, I'm just chomping at the bit and dying here because, man, having 3 careers gives me the opportunity to put life in different perspectives. And let me give a plug for the military. What we're talking about here is basic leadership. And when you're an entry-level soldier, you start out having to be tactical and having to do everything yourself. And you're right. A lot of times people never make that transition from being everything and doing everything to learning how to delegate. And the thing I love about the military is at every level in my career, they provided opportunities for education and training. Now, 26 years later, I go to Raytheon and I'm in industry in a well-respected company, and that doesn't exist. We had vice presidents that had risen to a level that would have gotten the way they behaved and treated people would have gotten them fired as lieutenants in the Army because they didn't know how to lead and manage. To Colin's point, they rise to a level because they're technical experts and they're shitty with people. You're not going to go anywhere with that. Now, flash forward, that's the reason, one of the reasons I got out of that industry and I started working in mentoring. Mentoring is the key here. If and when you get stuck, and you're going to get stuck, if you don't have somebody that you trust and respect to bounce ideas off, to talk about these kinds of things, and it isn't social media. It's not LinkedIn. It's not Facebook. It's not TikTok. It's not Instagram. It's a human being that you can sit, that you respect, that you can have this conversation with. And it doesn't have to be somebody at my age, but it still has to be somebody who's to the point that you and Keith were making it. Once you get the job, you got to perform, man. You got to show how good you are at it. And even then you're going to make mistakes. And so there's so much to this. And I really feel bad, to be honest with you, for the upcoming generations, because relationships have gone out the window. We're so busy and moving so fast, which is why I love the work you're doing, Ben, to create enduring messaging and lessons where people can plug in and say, it is about leadership. It's about how you treat people. It's about mentoring them and moving them forward and giving them an honest place where they can have a conversation without fear of losing their job or their position. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I was just going to say, but it is also about likes. No, nothing. Really?
Yeah, I am sitting here thinking, so I'm watching this series on TV called the World's Toughest Test, the Special Forces thing, and they get these celebrities and they actually have ex-SF people that are training them for a week and listening to the attitudes and the way that they assess their value and worth to the world is just so foreign to me. And it's transient. It's not enduring. It's not about likes, although it is about likes if you want to get paid these days. Right?
Alan, we're in a media company here. It is about likes.
Hey, but you know what? We got to find a way to break that and turn it from the trivial bullshit media that's out there that sells to people that really value enduring content, which is why having Stefan and Colin on board is so valuable and important, and get their insights to understand what's really going on in their world. Because not everybody's going to be an influencer. You're not going to get the mega millions of dollars. You're going to go to work for a company, and they're going to make you work your ass off, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. But it's still, I think one of the things that is mysterious to me is, what do you have to do these days to get on somebody's radar to, like, I know what I would do to market myself and try and get out there and get to what I want to do. But I'm also a little nutty and crazy and will do just these kind of out of the box things to try and get noticed. And, especially when I'm trying to achieve a goal. Like I love the saying from Bruce Lee, which is be like water. And that is what I try to do. Like you can put a barrier in front of me. I'm going to find a way over it, under it, around it, through it. Like I will figure out how to penetrate whatever barrier there is in front of me. And I just wonder, like, how difficult is it these days for younger people looking to grow their careers and grow what they're doing? I just wonder how different it is. Or at least from my perspective, I almost feel like it's easier because there's so much accessible technology and ways to get in front of people these days. If we had, oh my God, if I was a young 20-something and we had the social media tools back when, I would be exploiting the hell out of it, which is what we're trying to do here with this. But I don't know. Stefan, how do you leverage technology today to position yourself for those things you're trying to get recognized in?
I think it's a fully loaded question. I think it just depends on the person. And I think to Alan's point, and it made me think of something earlier, there are companies out there who market to everybody, like this is for everybody, or things along the lines of that. But there are also companies that are like, this is for this one niche type of group. We are going to market the hell out of it so that all these people who are into this type of thing can have their eyes attracted to that one thing. And I think that can work your way with relationships as well in terms of marketing yourself. If there's people who align with your values and your morals, maybe those are the people that you stick to, and you stick to them like crazy. So I think it just depends. In terms of the digital world, it just has become so saturated and just so overloaded with things. It's like at this point, now you have to find even more creative ways, maybe even outside of the internet, to be able to try to attract that attention within the internet in a weird type of internetception type thing.
Yeah. Newspapers, that's where it's at. Colin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think Stefan makes the point here. Like you said, Ben, social media has become a huge tool, but it's also become a huge burden. And the way hiring happened 30, 40 years ago was the only way you attracted candidates and how people knew you were actually hiring was either you knew it by word, or they posted in a job board somewhere, or they advertised in a newspaper. And most of the time, and tell me because I wasn't around then, you probably had to apply in person, right? And bring the physical sheet of paper. It's changed, right? So now everybody posts online, and anybody nationwide who has a visa or is a citizen can apply to this job. And so now they're dragging in these huge nets of candidates, which makes it a little bit more difficult. Now, one of the greatest benefits of you handing in that physical application was you could talk to the secretary or the clerk or whoever was manning it and say, hey, who's the manager? Can I talk to him and introduce myself and see him face to face? That's a huge advantage that we've lost. You don't even know who the manager is of the job you're applying to these days. It just lists job, role. Doesn't even tell you the department most of the time. So I can't tell you how many times my parents or my grandparents or other friends are like, did you introduce yourself to the manager? Did you know their email? Could you talk to somebody? And you're like, no, it's a blank wall. You apply, they talk to you if they like you. So there's no way you can get in unless you just haunt people on LinkedIn and hope you find the right guy who matches the right department. That's hopefully the job you applied for. So there's a difficulty in that. And that makes connections even bigger and makes an even larger impact because of somebody, you have a huge advantage now.
Yeah, I'm reminded of something Gary Vaynerchuk talks about often, which is attention arbitrage. And I think that's really what some job searches have really become, is attention arbitrage. And I would say that some strategies here that I would employ if I'm looking for something. First off, meetup.com. Meetup is a great tool. Go find affinity groups that you feel you can connect with and go to their gatherings to sit in and meet other people who are gathering to talk about things you're interested in. That's a great way to just get out there and network. Finding the hiring agency or staffing agency for a company and trying to reach out to them and say, hey, how do I get on the radar of some company that you're interested in reaching out to? Utilize the hell out of LinkedIn, because right now it is probably the most notable professional networking social media site that is out there. And the more people you can make genuine connections with, and I will say, there's a lot of people on LinkedIn who will reach out to you because they're trying to sell you something. I reject 98% of those things. If somebody reaches out with the general, hey, we have similar interests, or I was going through LinkedIn and I stumbled upon your profile and I think we should connect. It's just like the genuine connections, going to Meetup. If you don't have business cards, just go print some. Like, they're really cheap these days. Put your name, your email address, your phone number on it. And it doesn't have to be fancy, but something to hand out to people. And I know what I used to go to meetups a lot when I lived out in California, and I would exchange cards with people. The next thing I would do whenever we had a break at one of these things, I would sit down, I would take pictures of all the cards that I picked up and put those people in my contact and reach out to them on LinkedIn and just make that connection while it's fresh in your head and just grow your network, grow your circle. And over time, by the way, Stefan, you posted about the podcast. You also posted about your recent accomplishment. And you've done a great job of building your network. You've had a bunch of people chime in and comment on things. You don't have to be an extrovert to build your social media contacts. You can build them one contact at a time as you're going through. Gentlemen, I'm going to give you guys, Stefan, Colin, an opportunity here to kind of wrap up. Any thoughts, feedback, or even questions for Alan and I as we look to wrap things up?
I think one thing to pick up on the growing your social network, and I appreciate the comments on that. It means a lot. Yeah. One even crazier thing, even try Instagram for it. I have actually managed to, because this, I think it was when I first got out to school for my master's program, I had reached out to a couple just like journalists and people that I followed on there, and I would send them DMs on there. And I was like, hey, I follow your content, like this and that. Do you have time to chat? And sure enough, I managed to get a couple Zoom meetings out of it through even something as crazy as Instagram. So yeah, so social does have some benefits there. But even outside of the conventional LinkedIn and places like that, like you can find some connects as well. So I think that's something to highlight a little bit too.
I will say, you never know who you will connect with on LinkedIn and, or any social media platform. As a matter of fact, John Pabin, who we did an article about greenwashing, saw him on TikTok, reached out to him, made a connection. Next thing you know, we're exchanging emails. I do an article about his book, and he's going to be on the podcast here in a little bit. I am not shy about reaching out to people and just saying, hey, let's have a conversation. I fully embrace that. Colin, how about you?
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like I'm the only one dissing on social media for this whole podcast, but I think what you and Stefan are saying is right, though. There's definitely an opportunity out there where they've cut the barrier of entry to go talk to people. And especially if you're in that role and you're looking for those kind of roles where you're in media or arts or things that are technical online, you can definitely cut through a lot of the red tape and get to the people you want to talk to. And all it takes is just reaching out. I think for those people who aren't in those roles, you still have to go more of a traditional method. But like I was saying earlier, if you're in a technical role, unfortunately, it's still about the technical aspects. If you want to get out of a leadership role, it's really about how you present yourself in the interview. But social media definitely has improved how you can find people that are in the positions that you want to be talking to.
Yeah, I think it is. I wish I could say that there was one broad brush approach that you could take to this stuff, but it really is a game of finesse. And what works one direction, God, the Lord knows, just even with our own social media posts, I'll post something and it'll be great and it'll get a lot of attention, and then I'll repeat it and then like nothing. It even happens there. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Before we go, Alan likes to do the rundown. Alan, what nuggets of wisdom and insight did you pick up from this conversation we had today?
So, number one, just to thank Stefan and Colin, because the perspectives that y'all provide are actually, they're invaluable to the whole group. So the first thing, recapping here, is Ben, I always take the time to recognize leadership, because he's the CEO of the company and the leader here, and his insights are important because the buck stops with him. And I appreciate the fact that he is reaching out to multiple generations. So I appreciate Ben doing that. Then we moved into Stefan and the conversation around the job search he had just been on. And the note I took here was, it takes grit. You got to stay the course. I was going to ask you, Stefan, how many resumes did you send out from the time you graduated from college to the time you got hired?
Oh man, if I can be honest, it was probably upwards of 200-300.
That is a key insight to Ben and I, because it's not the world I grew up in for sure. And you got to tailor every one of them. And so it's the grit of staying the course and not giving up is a huge thing. Having grit applied differently when I was entering the job market. So compliments on that. And the fact that you did a Zoom interview as opposed to an in-person interview is huge, because you're missing that face-to-face connection of sitting in a panel and having people look at you and you look at them all at one time, and they can't have private conversations behind your back. If they're going to say something, they got to stay in front of you. So anyway, great stuff there, Stefan, with you. Colin, the insight that you had about the experience right now of working in a field that you're not degreed in, and how important it is, this balance between the college degree and the skill set, and having leadership that is beyond HR. I'm just going to say that. That's not just taking that rec and putting value on it, but trying to find the magic of the person and find out what they're like on the inside, I thought was a fantastic one. And the fact that some people that get hired and selected on the basis of credentials get the position and they suck at it. They're awful, and they're awful with people, and the resume in the hiring doesn't necessarily say it all. The next insight, number 4, Ben's question. I'm going to answer it. He said, are we overqualified people for work? And the answer is yes, definitely. And yet we're underqualified because we're not always looking for the right things, that magic that makes that person the right person for that job. And how you figure that out is an open question. Number 5, Keith's vision about, in many fields like the one he's in with pharma, a degree is required. It's not optional. And Raytheon's the same way in many of the fields. And so if you're in a field that requires the technical stuff here, and I'm mentoring you, I'm just going to say, go out and get your degree, do what you got to do if you want to stay in that field. And if you don't, go find a field that doesn't need that degree. Insight number 6, Ben, you talked to this too. Setting these credential requirements that come out in HR recs put people at hiring managers at a disadvantage, because you're not always going to get the best person for the position. Even when you interview them and you know it's the best person, you can't bring them on board because there's some rule that says that you can't. So there's something there in the intersection between HR and hiring that's there. Keith mentioned that degree was a ticket to play. He's exactly right, in my view, and Ben's comment about more competition because of the layoffs are there. Number 7, Colin, you talked about fields matter, and you mentioned the business about operations and qualifications, and throwing qualifications is gobbledygook. And if you're a hiring manager, so much of it is. And how do you penetrate through the gobbledygook to get the quality of the person that's there? I said it, and I'll say it until Ben tells me to shut up. You're not interviewing a rec or a resume. You're interviewing a person. And however you do it, you got to find a way to judge the qualifications of that person beyond their resume and how they answer the questions. Number 8, hiring is a science and an art, and yet there's very little training in the art of it. And again, it goes back to one of the reasons why I respect so much my upbringing in the military, where you were never qualified to be hired for a position that they put you in. You were hired because you had the potential to excel. And that's where mentoring became so important. Number 9, Keith mentioned the use of recruiters, and we hadn't talked a lot about that, but after I retired from Raytheon, I was contacted several times by executive recruiters, and it's not bothering you guys now, but at some point it will. You need to get on the radar of executive recruiters, and it's not a bad deal to connect with them now in your early career stages, because they have enormous power to put, as we used to say in the Army, it's not how good you are, it's who knows how good you are. And you got to have somebody who will advocate for you and put you at the top of that pile. Executive recruiters are often there. Number 10, this business about tactical transition to strategic transition, it is one that's hugely important. It's all about delegation and trust. And that gets back to basic leadership. If you're not a good leader, you don't need to move up. You shouldn't move up, because at every level, you're going to be put in charge of more people, and how you lead them is going to make a difference not only in your life, but in theirs as well. And then I'm going to go beyond the normal 10 that I got, because you guys had some additional comments. How you get on somebody's radar is hugely important. I did a lot of work in Raytheon with diversity, equity, inclusion, and I did studies on sponsorship. Sponsorship is huge. It comes from having a mentor that is a hiring manager that can put your name at the top of the list to say, hey, have you thought about this person? Because I've been working with this person for 10 years and they deserve that opportunity. Stefan, number 12, you mentioned that's a loaded question. It's a saturated information world and got to go beyond that. I have 13,000 first level connections on LinkedIn. I send out a lot of invites, and I use LinkedIn to market my work. If you're looking for a position in a company, the chances are somebody like Ben or I are connected to some of the key leaders in that company. I love connecting people I care about to senior leaders in those organizations. And nobody's mentioned that yet. If you got somebody you want to connect with and you look at my profile and you find out I'm a connection to them, send me a note. I'd be happy to do that. I think that's a great way to leverage the technology. Ben, this business about attention arbitrage, I'd never heard of that before. And he gave you several tools there: meetup.com, affinity groups, LinkedIn, business cards. You don't have a business card, and spend the money and get yourself a freaking decent business card that's thick, that represents you, has got your company information and all that kind of stuff. On the attention arbitrage, though, Ben, I was going to add one more. You ought to be able to have a hit list of senior executives that are advocates for you. It's not about how good you are. It's about who knows how good you are. And then, Colin, your comment about opportunity, reaching out beyond social media and traditional methods to make those connections with people that you value and respect. I tell all my mentees, I'm never more than a phone call, a direct message, an email away. And so when you're in that position and you're looking for something, that's how you get this game of finesse. So anyway, there we are with 12 insights for tonight's hour and a half session or whatever it was.
We're a little long on this podcast, but that's all right.
Hey, we got more people.
Yeah, that's true. When we have more people, it makes for a better conversation. Thank you, guys. Thanks to everybody, even Keith, who isn't here anymore, for jumping on and taking a little bit of your day and spending it with us. For folks listening to the podcast, thanks very much for checking this out. We have some stuff that we are going to be planning for in 2024. And also, we're doing our best to keep these things regular. But with the holidays coming up, we might have a little bit of irregularity. But keep us in your thoughts. And the best way to do that is hit the subscribe button so you can be immediately alerted the moment a podcast is posted. And you'll go, what? A new podcast? I've got to go hear that. So thanks everybody for checking this out. I appreciate your thoughts, your wisdom. And until next time, we will see you later. Adios.
Adios.